We've got another real life business problem for Rocketblock's experts to solve in today's mock interview. Today's case is a good example of what it can look like when you get a familiar industry during your interview. On today's case, we're working with Chili's, the global restaurant chain that has been in the headlines recently for their turnaround over the past couple of years. As a reminder, you won't get better at math by watching Goodwill Hunting, and if you want to improve your case interview skills, you need to be practicing actively and deliberately. At the very least, pause this video after each question to attempt your own answer out loud, and when you're ready to build your foundational skills for real, come to Rocketblocks to work with our concepts, drills, and connect with others in our peer marketplace. Good luck and have fun casing.
The year is 2022. See if you can cast your brain far back into the depths of time. And Chili's, once a leader in US casual dining, is now grappling with slowing traffic, eroding margins, and a brand that is struggling to resonate with today's diners in the post-COVID era. Despite a large national footprint and strong legacy awareness, Chili's has faced increasing pressure from fast casual upstarts, shifting customer preferences and operational inefficiencies. Leadership is concerned that the brand has lost relevance, particularly with the younger demographic. Gen Z doesn't like Chili's.
I guess so.
The CEO has brought in your consulting team to answer two key questions. Question one, what drives Chili's underperformance? And question two, how can the brand reposition itself for long-term growth? Your task, should you choose to accept it, is to conduct a structured assessment of Chili's recent challenges across market, customer, and internal dimensions, then craft a turnaround strategy that enhances competitiveness, improves unit economics, and helps Chili's win in a rapidly evolving restaurant landscape.
Excellent. So Rob, this hits home. My wife is a huge Chili's fan, actually. She grew up in Mexico. They're actually huge there. So I don't know if this is a Mexico problem, but let's dive in. I need to do this case justice for her. So
Do Chili's fans have their own name? Are they called, what would they? Well, you work on the structure, I'll work on what we're going to call Chili's fans.
got it. Let's do it. All right. So I'm going to start with the challenge, just read it back to you, and then some context. If I get anything wrong, please let me know. So challenge, Chili's engaged us to determine kind of a two-part plan. One, what's driving their underperformance? Two, how can the brand reposition for long-term growth and success? Context. So it's 2020, so going back in time, post-COVID.
2022.
2022, thank you. Chili's, I remember when they were a leader in dining, but it sounds like declining traffic, margin issues, weakening brand, probably something that's happening with a lot of restaurants in this space currently, especially those chain restaurants. Pressure sources, it sounds like fast casual. Didn't realize that was impacting them as heavily. Consumer preferences changing, kind of to your point about Gen Z, maybe perhaps changing, not as being a big fan. And then operational inefficiencies, I imagine this is something that plagues a lot of restaurants. How am I doing so far?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, excellent. A few questions coming out of this that I'd want to try and gauge before jumping into an approach. The first one is goal. Have they set any kind of metric goal? And I'm thinking, a profitability target, revenue enhancement, maybe even shrinking of number of locations.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it is less specific than that. It is more identify the drivers of recent underperformance, get back to where we were, and then get ahead. And that is both kind of a revenue margin goal.
Okay. That's fantastic to know. Given that perhaps there's no numerical yet, would want to get a better understanding of their size to some of those parameters you were just touching on. So do we have an understanding of, perhaps revenue, profitability, number of locations, number of countries?
Yep. So today revenue is 4.4 billion. So this is not a small company.
Yeah.
Market cap valuation around 7 billion, and their global assets are around 2.6 billion. So in terms of like footprint,
Okay.
their footprint is global. So US is the core market, but they have franchise agreements in North America, LATAM, Middle East, and Asia. So those Mexican Chili's that your wife grew up going to, they are franchise owned. So whoever that franchisor must be killing it.
Killing it. And no Europe too, which is a bit surprising, but I guess hopefully makes it a bit easier for us here. Excellent. Rob, I think I have enough to get started. If you give me maybe a few minutes, I'm going to craft a bit of a framework based on what you told me and then come back with what I'm thinking. How's that sound?
Great.
So, Rob, I think I have an initial approach, base a lot of it kind of on where it sounds like the Chili's CEO wanted us to go to. So I'm thinking about this initially in two parts. I'm going to break each of those down to about three or four parts. So first, I want to diagnose the underperformance. So what's the root cause of this? Second, I want to position for more long-term growth. So let's take diagnosing first, figure out where the problem resides. And I want to think about this in three core ways. I want to look at the market dynamics, the customer behavior and brand, and the kind of internal operations or economics. So let's start at the top there. Market dynamics. What are the industry trends? We know this is post-COVID. It sounds like, maybe people aren't dining in as much. It sounds like maybe they're taking it to go with that fast casual versus casual dining. That also then takes me to the competitive landscape. What's the market share loss that we've experienced, and who are those new entrants? Is it actually new competitors, or those competitors just simply expanding the number of locations and getting closer to our geographic area? Also, what are the macro factors? I mean, if I think back to 2022 and even more recently, inflation, you had labor shortages, supply chain disruptions. I imagine a lot of those are plaguing us. So let's dive deeper into those. Let's jump to that second part now, which is the customer behavior and brand. So we know that customer preferences have changed. It sounds like, maybe people are becoming more health conscious. Is there a speed? Is there a convenience factor? Let's dive into what they actually want or are looking for. But then also the brand relevance. It seems like this is awareness versus affinity. And, how has this changed with those customers of different generations? And then, finally, for this diagnosed underperformance, I want to think about operations and economics. Store level performance. Let's understand what's the traffic we're getting, what's the average ticket size, which stores are performing above average versus below average. And then I also want to think about each store's cost structure. So, what are the cost of goods sold? What's our labor, our overhead? What's the cost of food? This is usually a major issue for most restaurants. And then finally, for this piece, I want to understand the digital maturity. Are we doing things like ordering online? Do we have we partnered with the apps to do delivery? Do we offer pickup services? So I think those are a great way to understand, what's the issue, but then to that second part of, how do we position once we determine the issue for the long-term growth? And I'm thinking this in four ways. I'm thinking, how can we reposition ourselves to target the correct customers? How can we look at our menu and experience innovation? What's the operational improvement? And then finally, what's our loyalty strategy? So I want to break each of those down to a few parts. For the customer piece, let's clarify the target segment. Are we positioning for families? Are we positioning for the younger consumers? Are we positioning for older? So who are we actually targeting and how? From menu and experience, from my experience going to a lot of these chain restaurants, it's like a Cheesecake Factory. You have, 5 or 6 different pages of menus, right? So is that impacting one, our food costs? Is it also the experience? There's this kind of choice paradox where we have too many choices, so we don't choose anything, kind of like when you're flipping through Netflix. So I want to understand what's the menu and what are the options that we have, and are they good quality? From an operational improvement perspective, I talked about the cost piece above, and I'm going to double down on that here. Let's source better, let's prep better, and let's reduce costs just in general across the entire supply chain, from sourcing all the way to delivery to our customers. We can probably even look at store format there. There might be a way to reduce the size of stores. A lot of these chain restaurants are massive, so it can reduce maybe perhaps the number and do quicker turnover. And then finally, my last piece was the loyalty strategy. For mobile ordering, can we also do, a point system? If you order so much, do you get a free appetizer, free drinks? Are we doing happy hours for loyalty consumers? So something to kind of drive that foot traffic in, especially perhaps during weekdays when it's at a low point. So I threw a lot at you. If I had to kind of have an hypothesis about what is potentially the issue, I think it's probably going to be about two parts. One, I think it's probably going to be a loss of relevance with younger consumers. And two, I think it's probably going to be operational inefficiencies. The operational inefficiency, I think it's very common among restaurants. And then given the younger generation preference change, I think that's also a good hypothesis. If I had to kind of decide where I wanted to start, Rob, I'd want to deep dive into our operations and try and get some kind of scorecard to understand where are we overperforming, underperforming, where our costs are enlarged, and perhaps not be able to identify where we can focus our efforts.
Great. I actually want to start kind of like more on the, what you mentioned in terms of relevance. because I think that is kind of like the core thing. And before we dive into it, I think you touched on these. But if you were to think about like the mega trends in in the universe of dining,
Mhm.
um, uh, particularly in the wake of COVID, right? Remember, this is like 2022. What do you think those kind of mega trends are? Like where, which will help drive our hypotheses?
Yeah. So I remember delivery and pickup, of course, being a huge one, right? You couldn't go out, and even if you could go out, people were worried about it. So that's the idea of, drive up, pickup, low touch or no touch, and then even partnering with the drive apps like the Uber Eats of the world, the DoorDashes of the world. And there was this also piece, and I remember this specifically with McDonald's, which was partnering with influencers. So you'd have a certain type of order from a celebrity, and they'd say, order this type, and there might even be a markup on that. So this kind of like delivery, no touch, low touch, and then also partnerships with influencers, I remember being huge during this time for, these kind of competitors.
That's exactly right. You can get the Taylor Swift order, which is just 7 fried ice creams, which is honestly nothing to get.
Here's some feedback from Rob. The basic structure of the framework aligns perfectly with the two-part question in the case. It's always good advice to remember to answer the question that was asked. It's not uncommon for newer casers to wind up with a structure that touches on relevant topics but doesn't directly answer the question at hand. One nit piece of feedback is that the loyalty program bucket feels like it's on a level more specific than the menu and operations bucket. It's perhaps possible to have leveled this up to something like customer experience that would have been more parallel to the other two categories in the structure. We all eat out, so Ben is thinking through how people make this decision in choosing where to go when they're choosing what restaurant to eat at. Because this is a restaurant question and not some obscure SaaS provider, Ben can and should show off this deeper understanding of the industry.
Awesome, great. Well, we actually have some survey data here, right? And it's basically across several dimensions. What the importance of this item, dimension is to diners, how those diners rate Chili's, and how they rate kind of our core competitor set of casual dining restaurants. So this is
Mhm.
less fast casual, more like, versus Outback Steakhouse and the Olive Garden. So I'm going to share this with you. Let me know when you can see it.
All right, Rob, I am with you. Give me just one moment to get my bearings, and then I'll walk you through what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and key question is, right, like, what insights and hypotheses does this drive?
Excellent. Okay. So, Rob, at a macro level, before working through each of these, I'm seeing 8 dimensions. And like you said, it's the importance of the diners, Chili's performance, so how we're doing and rated, and then those competitors. And, I would say it also looks like many of these Chili's has control over, albeit, I'll say at different time frames. So location probably difficult to change in the short term, whereas perhaps speed or service quality easier to change in the short term. So all of these are under our influence, but we have to understand different time frames to it. All right, so let's walk through each of these. Um, Price, importance to diners is high. This is one of the highest. Looks like it's top 4, top 5. We're within striking distance of zero point 0.5, and we're similar to our competitors, so pretty good there. Food taste, the most important to consumers. I'm not seeing any other fives. And Chili's were way off, whereas our competitors are right there. So this is number one red flag. We have a food taste or a food quality issue, which at a restaurant is not a great place to start. Let's keep working. Menu variety, actually not important to diners. Our competitors are, above that, but not well above. And we are so far above. And I'm going to come back to this. I don't think a 5 here is necessarily good. Perhaps we're overwhelming. Maybe we're like a cheesecake menu. But again, we're outperforming here when perhaps we shouldn't be.
So much cheesecake hatred,
I've actually never been to the cheesecake, so I need to stop this.
Well, it's not even a restaurant, it's a factory. So,
There we go.
you're
Thank you.
getting food out at the back, basically, is the way it works.
All right, so I think we're at service quality. We're on par with diners and actually just above competitor performance. So that's good to see. Not well above, but we're in the right range. Speed, again, one of the top in terms of importance to diners at 4, and same performance for Chili's and competitors, so no differentiation there. Location, Three in terms of diners, we're just above that, so we're outperforming importance to diners and performance competitors. I'm probably going to come back to this one. This one actually strikes me as very important. Location out of all of these might be one of the most difficult because it's infrastructure related. So the fact that we are already in good locations, in quote unquote like outperforming this is great to see. All the rest of these I think are probably quicker changes than the infrastructure related developing new restaurants or even having to move said restaurants. All right, let's keep moving. Delivery pickup options. Again, one of the top rankings for importance to diners. We're well under this. So, I would imagine maybe we're not even doing delivery or pickup, or we have very limited options, but our competitors are. So, if we think about COVID and kind of what you had asked me to double down on in terms of importance during that period, this would be majorly important, and we're really missing the boat here. And then brand awareness, again, one of the top for importance to diners, and we're just not meeting that. Competitors are, within striking distance, but we're well below. So maybe I can kind of summarize these back. So there is 3 of 8 that we are, either immaterially or to no importance of diners, but that we are outperforming on. So we outperformed on menu variety. That could be a bad thing. And, we outperformed by 0.5 within service quality and location. So that's good. So 3 of 8 dimensions we're outperforming on. 1 may actually be a negative to us. The other 2, not real differentiators. The problem is, of those that I identified as being 4.0 or higher, or like of high rank to consumers, 4 of 5 we're underperforming on. Price, well below. Food taste, very well below. Delivery pickup, well below. Brand, I think it was 3 versus 4, 4.5. So of the 5 highest ranks by our customers, 4 were very underperforming on, and none that we really differentiate on. Our differentiator was, I guess, the menu variety, but that was very low preference by consumers, which is not good. So, my takeaways: location, it's great that we're in great locations. I think that would be a huge investment. Menu variety, we've tried to differentiate there, but it's very low importance. And these 4 of 5 options that, are of high ranking to consumers, we're really underperforming on, which is not a good sign for long-term success.
Sure.
Here's some feedback from Rob. Ben does well to orient himself and me to the table as he starts to look for insights. Ben chose to walk through each row of data in this chart, which will get you to all the insights, but at the cost of time. A preferred approach for a case like this, given the large volume of data, might have been to move quickly to specific insights that were most critical for Chili's. One option would be to focus immediately on the dimensions that matter most to customers and see how Chili's performs. A second angle might have been to focus on where Chili's is obviously stronger or weaker than competition and pull out the implications from that. Once his analysis was complete, Ben did well to summarize the implications.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that jumps off the page to me, which is like probably one of those obvious answers that you might forget, is when you are thinking about where you're going to go out to eat, what is the first question that you're asking yourself?
Interesting. So I imagine I'm asking, what's the wait and how far is it to get there? So
Oh,
kind of what's this total time?
what I'm asking is, what do I want to eat? Right.
Oh,
That is the first question that I am asking myself. And so I think one of the things that jumps out to me is like, yeah, taste is really important, right? Like you got to have good food. Um, so one of the other things kind of jumping off this page to me is like, all right, there's a lot here, right? There's kind of a ton on this page in terms of like what we could go do. What I would like you to do is actually use the data and the conversation that we've had so far, to actually determine like what interventions we should do, right? And then I'd like you to think through, not just like an overall list, right? But like what is the sequencing with which you would do them, right? So, using, the information we've gleaned so far.
okay. Okay. Fantastic. So how can we improve? What's the sequencing? Perhaps a level of difficulty. Understood. Give me, maybe 30 seconds, come up with these, then I'll bring them back to you and we can discuss.
Great.
Okay. So one thing that struck me, before I walk through this is that we weren't really differentiated. The only thing we differentiated is menu, and everything we were trying to just kind of be on par. And it seems like, I think restaurants have one of the highest failure rates. Something like 30% of established restaurants fail. And it feels like if you're just going to be on par, it feels like purgatory. You know, you probably just go there to die eventually. So that's probably a very terrible way to think about it, but it's how I'm thinking here. So I'm thinking about this in three phases and four enhancements or changes. So let me talk through the phases and the changes, and then we can talk through each independently. So one, I'm thinking, let's fix the basics. So this is, you know, might be high impact, medium to low difficulty, but I'm thinking under fix the basics, food, taste, and quality, kind of like you were referencing previously, and then also delivery pickup experience. I think that, especially right now in this time period, can be a quick win. Um, Second phase, I'm thinking differentiate where it matters. So again, I want to get this differentiation. How can we be different? Gen Z strikes me as someone that really uses social media and they look for that brand. So I want to think about brand awareness as a differentiation point. And then phase three, kind of this optimizing value, I want to look at our price or value perception. So let's start at the top. So under phase one, the first piece was food, taste, and quality. If you're a restaurant, you got to get this right. So I want to think about, can we do a menu refresh, perhaps shrinking down that menu, focus on quality over quantity. I also want to look at ingredient sourcing. I also want to think about what menu options are, you know, changing or evolving. So each month coming out with a new option, maybe it's seasonal, maybe it's a chef's choice. I would then want to think about delivery and pickup options. So from a pickup option, I feel like a lot of these places have pickup zones where it's like those first few pickup locations or parking spaces in the front. You can drive up, they're coming out to your car, low touch point. I want to think about it. Can we set those up? But then also partnering with ride apps. I would love if Chili's could also probably do its own app. You just redesign the customer experience and you control that experience. You know, in the short term, that's probably not easy to do, but long term, we probably can. So short term sounds like pickup zones and partnering with the delivery apps, but long term, maybe even creating our own app to control that experience. I imagine each of those is probably medium-ish difficulty. Phase two, I want to differentiate, and this is that brand awareness. So can we relaunch our brand positioning? It sounds like maybe targeting families to those younger consumers. You know, can we collaborate with influencers? Can we work with creators on food or lifestyle and how we fit into that, especially in suburban locations where I feel like Chili's tends to thrive, or these kind of chain locations tend to thrive. But I think there's also an interior design of the restaurants, a refresh, and maybe that's different styles of tables. Maybe that's expanding the bar so it's a place for weekday happy hours. You know, I went to Applebee's on a work trip and that place was booming during happy hour, which is crazy. So I think there's an opportunity there. I think this would be a neat way to differentiate as well. And then finally, this kind of phase three, this price or value perception. I think there's an opportunity to bundle meals for families, especially in suburban locations, making it attractive for groups and a better price point. We can also reinforce our value messaging. So, you know, $10 meals with a drink or, you know, some kind of bundle price. And then everyday value items. So digital channels, can you, if you use the app, can you get a notification saying buy tonight and get this kind of deal? Less differentiation, but more opportunity to drive customers during the week when they perhaps wouldn't be. So I think using those three phases would be a really unique way to try and turn around the areas that we identified previously.
Great. Awesome.
Here's some feedback from Rob. We're 20 minutes into the case, and when asked to brainstorm, it can be tempting to just start listing ideas off the top of your head. Ben pauses here and comes up with a strong structure. Structure problem solving and communication isn't only evaluated during your initial response to a case, and you have to stay structured throughout the interview. According to Rob, this was a way above the bar response. Fix the basics, differentiate where it's valuable, and then next horizon is a story that executives can really grab onto. Rob ended the chart section by driving home a point that food taste and menu is the most important factor when choosing a restaurant. Ben directly incorporated this feedback into his brainstorm, and this specific category was his number one bullet when considering a solution. If your interviewer is giving you guidance and feedback during your interview, take it. One nit piece of feedback is that this structure is a bit different than the original approach Ben suggested as part of the initial prompt. There was an opportunity to explicitly talk about the transition from his original structure to this updated approach. Again, the new structure is very strong, and the nit here is on the transition from one structure to another, not on the approach itself.
So, Ben, I've got some really good news for us. One, we've invented a time machine and we're able to skip ahead to present day.
Okay.
Two, our interventions that you just proposed, we did them, and they have been some absolute bangers. So the chart I'm showing right now, year over year change in traffic at Chili's. Obviously, this looks like it is zeroed out kind of mid 2024.
Mm,
But if you think about, change since even then, right? Like we're up 20%. And then if you think about back, in the end of 22 when we began this journey, we're up significantly more, right? So from -10 to +20, right? So we're up, I don't know, about 30% since
mm.
the time started. So obviously, some really good momentum swing for us. But I think the question is like, what do we do to maintain and build going forward, right? So we simplified our menu, we doubled down on taste, right? We got the real good basics of convenience and delivery like nailed down, right? So like, what's next? How do we continue to like maintain and build on this relevance?
Interesting. This is nice to see. I feel like rarely in consulting you get to see, your experience results so quickly.
It's one of the benefits of having a time machine. One of
Excellent.
them. Yeah,
Give me 10 seconds just to organize my ideas and let's talk it through.
great.
Okay. So I'm thinking about this in three parts. One, I want to set up some kind of loyalty program. So there's people that are coming often, let's keep them coming. Two, I want to think about format innovation, both globally as well as on a restaurant basis. And then I want to think about even more about kind of our delivery pickup. So let's talk through each of those. So from a loyalty program perspective, I want to do some kind of tiered loyalty program. My wife and I just became involved with a gluten-free bakery, and this is something we're looking at heavily right now. And I know that sticky customers, if you continue to work with them, will become even stickier and keep coming in. So I really want to double down on what this tiered loyalty program could look like. I also think that it'd be interesting to do some kind of like Chili's insider menu items. So if you're on the loyalty program at certain levels, you're getting certain notifications of menu items that everyone else doesn't know about, or maybe you get to try menu items before they come out for everyone else. Some kind of experience related piece. Again, bodes well for younger generations. Next piece was format innovation. And I think this is like grow smart and not necessarily big. So underpenetrated, kind of high traffic suburban areas. We talked about suburban areas being really good. Location were already, it sounded like overperforming. I think it was like a 4.5 to 4, 3.5 versus 3. So what are other growing suburban locations where we haven't doubled down yet? I also want to think about non-traditional forms. I was at Chili's in the airport, again, coming back from Mexico. Wife's a huge fan of Chili's, and the place was booming. And they even had a small takeout area too. It was very small, very quick turn. So I think
Chili's to go.
there we go, Chili's to go. So I think this kind of like airport or non-traditional formats could work well. And I also want to think about greater international expansion. Something that caught me off guard was that they're not available in Europe. Could you start with like a Heathrow airport or a Florence airport, a place where a lot of Americans are passing through, as a starting point, test it out, and then continue to expand? And then the last place I, wanted to talk about again was this delivery pickup. Can we be potentially a category leader in this kind of like off-premise dining? So the ways I'm thinking about this, can we do exclusive virtual only brands? Again, if you're on our app, can you only be the one to see this opportunity? And I also want to think about subscription meal programs. I know I'm in DC now. I see the number of people walking around for lunch, but I also see the number of people getting lunch delivered. I have friends that are traders, and every single day they're getting lunch delivered to their building and brought to their desk. Can we double down on these potential areas? People that, don't have time to walk around and get lunch,
Don't
but
have
want it
time to
delivered.
I don't have 15 minutes for a meal. Corn, let's go.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So I think that would be a really unique way to continue to build on this momentum and try to continue, especially with this younger generation.
great. Awesome.
Here's some feedback from Rob. Again, Ben does a great job to answer in a structured way at a time when he might be tempted to start throwing random ideas out. This question in the case is essentially asking for a second level of innovation and ideas after your first set has already been given, and Ben rises to the challenge with evolutions on his original ideas that showcase his overall creativity and strong business thinking.
I love that. I have some good and bad news again for us, right? The bad news is that our time machine malfunctioned and now we're back in 2022, right? Which
Okay.
It's a little bit jarring, but you get it. Your memory has been wiped, so you don't realize that we did implement these things and they were successful. But the good news is you have a meeting with the CEO right now, right? And he wants the 1, 2, 3 bullet points on how we are going to effectuate, or what we've identified as the drivers of underperformance and what we're going to do to right the ship here at Chili's, right? The fajita ship, the
There we
good, the
go.
good ship, baby back ribs.
I like that we're staying on brand here. Okay. So our goal of the case was to determine why Chili's is underperforming and recommend a way to reposition and turn it around. From a recommendation perspective, I would recommend a phased turnaround. First off, improving food quality and delivery experience. Second, reigniting the brand experience among younger consumers and families. And then third phase, reinforcing our value through price clarity. There are risks to this, primarily being operational complexity, given the number of locations we have globally, but then also potential capital requirements. Again, large footprint, need to do this everywhere. To mitigate this risk, though, I'd recommend prioritizing those interventions through impact and feasibility. So where are our quick wins, we can get the greatest impact, but then also piloting in test markets. Let's make sure this works on a small scale before we start scaling it out. As next steps, though, our team would love to assist you in identifying where those pilot programs should be, and then also piloting loyalty programs and new store formats for long-term expansion and to continue doubling down if this does work.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time.
Rob, appreciate it. Thank you.
You want to stop the recording?
I don't know if I can because I think it's James's.
Oh yeah, good call. What happens if I click on it? Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the temporal stuff in this case is real weird.
I appreciated that. It's good. It's good. I appreciate the case.
Yeah, good enough. Good enough. All right. So I guess I'll need James to send me the recording for me to put the notes in. Yeah, good work. And I don't know, he'll kind of like let us know when it's up. So
I think so. Well,
sweet.
always a pleasure, sir. We'll chat with you soon.
Everybody.
See you, Rob.
Hey everyone, it's Kenton Kavesti here, the founder of Rocket Blocks. Thank you so much for watching this mock interview video. I hope you found it informative and helpful as you are getting ready to prepare for your own interviews and hopefully landing that job offer you are excited about. We have a ton of great content on the Rocket Blocks channel coming out on a weekly basis, mock interviews, mini lessons, and chats with our Rocket Blocks experts. So if you haven't subscribed yet already, please do so. There is a big red button below. And if you hit that, you'll get all of our content as soon as it comes out. Thanks for watching and have a great day.